doing fractional or Vciso work, we are free in ways that in-house CISOs are not. Typically, the organization has already determined they need to do something, but they don't know what to do. And so that's better than getting a volunteer internally sometimes. And so you can bring in the expertise to be able to establish a real legitimate roadmap, a real strategy for how to build out this program over a number of months and years.
This is a Security Weekly production. Security Weekly is a resource of Cyber Risk Alliance.
The Cybersecurity Collaborative and Wiz is proud to present CISO Stories. Each week, CISO Stories takes a deep dive on security leadership with one of the contributors to my latest book, the best-selling CISO Compass: Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers, as well as from other top CISOs and security thought leaders. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/CSC or visit cyberleadersunite.com. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Vciso's Michael Phillips, co-founder and CISO at VSec LLC, and Matthew Duchant, CEO, MD3 Consulting.
Worked in technology across all the disciplines, database management, data communications, systems administration, networking, so on and so forth. And our organization was acquired by a global financial firm. And when they acquired us, one of the top things that they had was the identity of anyone who had a bank account at a Swiss bank. And they needed cybersecurity around those programs. They had no one in the US. And so I was a pretty good candidate, given I knew where all the bodies were buried in the organization, having worked in all the other disciplines, was able to take that knowledge and then apply it to security. So went into security, had to get my CISSP at the time. I think I'm like 4508 is my CISP number. So one of the first groups that did not get grandfathered in, but had to actually concentrate and study. And that's pretty much how my career got started, and I've been in it ever since.
Excellent. Matthew?
Yeah, I also had a sort of similar path. My entire career has been in information technology. I got into security working at a global design firm, IDEO. And they were all doing very interesting work with medical devices, kidney transport systems, and operating on, spines and nerves, and working with, patients, interviewing them in their homes. And it really sort of started from more of a privacy perspective. It was the idea that we had to protect all of these participants and protect their privacy. And from there, just a natural extension into information security. So, and that's sort of been, my approach actually to date here, is to start with a privacy point of view.
Excellent. Well, I know you guys have great backgrounds, and I have one of those low CISSP numbers too. So we'll have to see when our dates were sometime. It seems like it was so long ago that I wrote that thing, but it is a great credential. There's other great credentials out there as well, but I think the CISSP, I think nobody can argue with, has stood the test of time, which I think has been very good. So today we're going to talk about being a Vciso. And I know there's a lot of CISOs that, from now and then you get these questions, or people thinking about going into this as a profession of doing the Vciso work. And I like the idea of a Vciso because we have this shortage of skills today in the industry, and not everybody can afford to have a full-time CISO on there. So let's explore what is a Vciso, and what made you want to, both of you, go down that path of doing Vciso work.
Yeah, I can take that one first here. For me, because I'd spent so much time in that design consultancy, I really love the idea of designing and building programs. I had been an in-house CISO for a number of years and was at a decision point about what my next opportunity was going to be. And I had a Fortune 500 company very interested. And they said, I think you do a fantastic job here protecting us, but we're kind of not interested in the same thing you are. We're kind of interested in keeping the lights on and reducing costs and, doing the minimal. And you really like building things from scratch. And I think that was really the deciding moment for me to form my own company. And what it has given me the opportunity to do is to build security programs all the time. So I'm not operating and maintaining. I'm really focusing on the capability building within each of my clients and improving those programs from very low maturity.
So is a lot of your work going in and establishing the security programs? Is that where they would bring you in?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I'm sure Michael agrees with me, and probably you do too here, that large companies have pretty good security at this point here. It's the small and medium businesses that are, especially those that are landing that new big client, or they have some sort of regulatory compliance that they have to adhere to. Those are the ones that really need our help. And typically they're going to have fairly low maturity. They're just not of the size where they even have maybe even full-time security staff at all. Maybe IT is filling that function part-time. But they don't have the capability, they don't have the governance or the expertise to know how to get started.
Yeah, and if I can add, for me, it's been interesting. I think I started virtual CISOing back in 2006 or so, around that time frame, and it was purposely because I'd come out of a national organization, federal government, and from a risk perspective, they were doing a lot of things, but it was a lot of paperwork. We were not as effective as I would have cared to be in that organization. So when I came out of there, I said, this could be a really nice thing to kind of commercialize, given what we had to do internally, but in a way that it's tuned towards organizations, to Matt's point, that could not afford what we do. And maturation is always the key point. When you come out and you go to an organization, you're always looking at what level of maturity their program is, whether it's non-existent or it's still getting built out. It's a 1.5, 2.0, whatever. And then what you want to do is try to see where you can integrate to help them then enhance that program. Oddly enough, though, the motivator for folks reaching out to us usually is something where they've either just had a hack, they just got an audit finding, they just got a third-party questionnaire from an organization who is now really, beefing up their vendor management piece, and so these folks have to meet these requirements of these large ISO lists or the NIST certifications. And so you go in and you try to help them do the minimal that they need to do to get through those situations, but then you stay there to help them then build the program by helping them construct, a strategy for what they need to do, assessing where they are, assessing where they need to go, to whatever this motivator was. If it's just to close out the issue and, get the right support in there at that time to help them, deal with the issue. And then you try to talk them into, listen, if you would have had these things in place in the first place, you probably could have prevented some of this from happening. And then it becomes a discussion, and then you get yourself in the door to help them try to structure a program, starting with things like response and recovery capabilities, and then you build out from there. That's been my experience.
What is your role as you're going in? Because you're basically one person, right? Is operating as that CISO. You don't have the team that the large companies have to actually execute these things. So where is that line, and how do you get those things done within an organization?
I think alignment with the proper level in the organization is absolutely critical. When we walk in the door, and it usually starts out with someone who can write a check and make some decisions, and a lot of times you end up working with people to establish just typical day-to-day runbook activities, but you don't want to get stuck there, right? I mean, those activities are pretty much what generates the metrics that needs to go into the broader report that then goes to management, that then goes to a board subcommittee. And you want to stay functioning at that level at all costs, because if you don't have the ability to influence, across the groups, You have to be able to drive some autonomy on things that need to get done. You have to be able to have someone have your back to say, no, we brought this person in for this purpose. This is what we intend to do. And they got to support you all the way through it. It's very difficult to try to get anything done at an analyst or architect level if you don't have the support of like the audit committee or some board subcommittee. And so when we talk about structuring reports that need to go to those subcommittees, that's where we really have the influence that we need to get things done.
So are you creating those reports that go on, or is there somebody inside the organization that has that task?
So typically what I will do, because the reporting can be different depending on the level of maturation at the organization. So if I'll ask to see what reporting they are doing, if it's none, then I always try to start with something very simple, typically using GLBA guidance on what the board should be able to see anyway. And then we talk about now, how do we get the data to create this report? Over time, what typically happens is those metrics all trend out, they get flat. And then you want to start talking about other metrics that represent a more mature organization to look at, kind of like, how much of the IT budget are we spending for security? But that's not something you look at right away. Up front, you're looking at, are we patching? Are we addressing with vulnerabilities? Are we responding in the right time frames? Are we training the right folks? And and you can tell that that's a very basic program that probably isn't in place. Once that's in place, then you can move on to more mature metrics.
Matthew, are you finding similar things when you go into an organization and you're basically given a canvas, right, to start from,
or no canvas at all, right, and starting from zero, which is actually scarier but more fun, I think. Michael is totally right. I totally agree with him. We need to come in at the highest level of the organization as we can. We want to be doing upper management consulting, preferably C-suite. In some ways here, doing fractional or Vciso work, we are free in ways that in-house CISOs are not. Typically, the organization has already determined they need to do something, but they don't know what to do. And so that's better than getting a volunteer internally sometimes. And so you can bring in the expertise to be able to establish a real legitimate roadmap, a real strategy for how to build out this program over a number of months and years. On the other end of things, as everything sort of matures and you start to train up your replacement in leadership, you're controlling your exit at the same time, rather than being, what we would call the throat to choke, or we always talk about this 3 to 5 year life cycle for in-house CISOs. We can control the narrative a lot better when we come in as a real true partner and not as a vendor running a project here. So it really is all about that capability building and hiring new people or training those that are there and building out those new capabilities, starting from simple things like vulnerability management.
The article this podcast is based upon can be viewed in the best-selling cybersecurity leadership book, CISO Compass, Navigating Cybersecurity Leadership Challenges with Insights from Pioneers. So how long do you, what is the duration? If you go into a company, how long does the virtual CISO stay there to get to that stage?
Yeah, it depends answer, of course. If you're working with a startup that is already scaling quickly and undergoing, rapid maturation, you're trying to match their speed, of course. More established companies that maybe are establishing a new clientele that requires new regulatory compliance, let's say, they might move a bit slower. And so, you can run through a whole life cycle of maturation in as fast as a year, as slow as 5 years. It's all going to be governed by, we are essentially doing a very large behavior change experiment. It just happens to be around information security and privacy. And the changing in behavior, the changing in the methodology of how they think about security and approach it is going to be governed by how averse or not they are to behavior change. And we typically see that again in startups. They're accepting that behavior change has to happen quickly here. They have to mature, or they won't get funding, or they won't get that client, and it's the end of the company. More established companies, maybe they're more accepting of that business risk, or they just can't change the way they do things as quickly.
Yeah, and to Matt's point, it's important to note that cultural shifts take time. It's not something that happens overnight. I have a client. I think I've been with him almost 10 years now, and the reason why that is, when I started with them, they had no program. They've got a full complement of folks working for them now, and I think about 15 people working in there. And the CIO, when I tried to exit, he said, "No, I really just want to be able to pick up the phone and call you for things." The other reason is, the time I've been there, they've had 4 different people in the CISO role, because the attrition for CISOs is so high. And then I'm the only thing that's static, that's still there, because I knew where we started. I know where the bodies are buried. I know what our risk assessment says we are. I know the strategic plan. I helped build it. I know where we're going. So effectively, I'm like a right hand to him, even with the folks we hire in to do the CISO role, helping them get trained up, understand the environment, understand the culture, understand the changes that need to occur within the culture. And even when I've tried to get out a couple of times, he's really made it interesting, and I'm still there with these guys right now.
I think Dateline might be calling you, because I think they are always looking for where those bodies are buried. So, but
what Michael said here, just to speak to that quickly, I think one of the key ways in which we're successful is we very quickly build an extremely high level of trust with some very important people. And I think that's a fairly unique skill, and it's essential here because we're basically dropping into the middle of their organization in progress, right? And we have to quickly understand not only the technical stack, but also the org chart and the politics of how things get done or don't get done very, very quickly in order to be effective.
So
and the business. You really have to understand the business. I apologize. And not only that, you have to have that executive presence, right? You have to be able to sit in the room. A fair amount of what I do is also advising the boards. And I've been in an executive session where, the auditors have brought in their report from the information security review. The information security staff have been in the board subcommittee attesting to why they have these findings. Then they get rid of all the senior management, and I stick around with the general auditor, and they say, well, are these guys blowing smoke at us or not? And we really then have to explain, and it's education at this point. It's educating them on what we just talked about, why it's relevant, why it may not be relevant to them, given their business risk and their business risk tolerance. And I think that's another plus that you get with folks like us in that boardroom.
So what are those key skills? If I tomorrow want to be a Vciso, do I need to be highly technical? Do I need to have other skills? Do I have to understand that industry vertical? What is it that's going to be the determining factor in my success?
Yeah, definitely. We've just talked about one of them, which is important, which is being able to read the tea leaves, right? Understand what's at play here. Why did they call you in the first place? How did you get here? And what's the backstory? So you obviously have to do your homework, lots of interviews with individuals, and really get the story and sort of assemble that and get a sort of a context of what's the state of this business right now? Why do they think they need this? We also talked about presence a bit as well here. So you've got to be able to hold your own. Some of that is technical know-how, of course. You got to know when or keep people honest here about their answers. And, even especially if there's an existing team, right? Are they pulling their weight, right? Be able to assess skills from a technical point of view. But again, I'll return to the behavior change part of this here. We're not only affecting or building security teams, in a vacuum, but we're also having to get others to do their part in security. The old adage of security is everybody's responsibility. Well, it's lip service until you can actually affect that change across an entire organization.
How long does a Vciso stay in an organization during the engagement? Since we're looking at a part-time role? How many, say, hours a month, or is that, or how does that get packaged up for the clients?
Yeah, I think it depends, of course. It depends if there's an existing team. It depends on the size of the business, depends on how fast they move. And I think that's all part of the initial conversation that happens after we do an assessment and understand where we are in the business, is to say you've got a number of levers to pull here now. Speed is one, money, resources is another, capacity of teams, both the local team and other stakeholders that do part-time security work. And then you have your business risk on top of that. And all of those things get mixed together to sort of give you the formula that you need to say, well, I think, 5 hours a week might be enough, keep the drumbeat going, or you really need somebody here 3 or 4 days a week because you've got to move faster. You have deadlines that you've either imposed, clients have imposed on you, et cetera. And in order to meet them, Mike and I are very capable at this point in our careers of saying, this is what it's going to take to get there.
Mm-hmm. So companies obviously want to save money in doing this. So, can you give me kind of a range? And I know it depends of say I'm a company and I want to go after a Vciso, what's that gonna cost me? On a per hour charge or however, what kind of range would a company be expecting?
So, and I won't say it depends. I actually do kind of command roughly between 10 and 12K per month for my services. And what I tell folks is I do whatever it takes to get the job done. So if whatever they call me in for, understanding what they need me to do is one thing. Articulating what that means as far as the results we need to achieve and how much time I'll need to be around, things like that, is always interesting. I'm always available virtually for the most part. I'm on site typically once or twice a month in most organizations. I don't really have to be at those locations, and pandemic just proved that out. I was able to take on, another 4 clients, not driving to my clients' offices, every week or every other week. The way I had them stretched out, all of my clients were in neighboring states, so it's a multi-hour drive one way and multi-hour drive back. But with the pandemic, I was able to leverage that time to take on more clients, and we were actually much more effective actually through the Zoom and things like that. It didn't hamper us at all because of the role that I play. I don't need to be on site doing back-to-back meetings with different people. We have very structured things that we do on a weekly basis. We meet with the analysts, the architect for certain things. We meet with the leadership team. We structure monthly updates to board subcommittees and to the boards for their quarterly meetings. And getting everything prepared for that is usually where all the activity happens on our side with the teams that we work with internally. We can do that separately.
So do you find Vcisos are more of a fixed price contract sort of arrangement?
Well, for me, it is. And some do it differently. Yeah, some are very project oriented. And in fact, Vciso not only just comes in and they're your substitute CISO, they also can come in and help CISOs do projects that require an executive presence so that you can do a project at a high enough level that goes across multiple disciplines on behalf of that CISO as well. So you may price that differently given the activity that's needed for that particular project. Or if I come in to do tabletop exercises, of course, that revenue model shifts on number of folks in the seats, how long I'm going to be there. So that's, but if you got me on a retainer, I would likely do your tabletop exercises as part of that retainer as well.
Right.
Yeah, to build sort of in a different way, I do more of a per hour charge, and I want to take this opportunity to talk about the landscape that we have here of Vcisos. So imagine you're hiring for legal services. We all know that there's a broad range per hour cost for a lawyer, right? You can be low 100s to $1,000 an hour, right? Folks like Michael and I have previous executive experience being in-house CISOs. But we have a broad landscape here in this marketplace of CISOs that have taken a boot camp or some training and are now a Vciso. So the offering is extremely different. Michael and I are operating at a very high level here because we produce a very high level of service in the time that we dedicate to our clients.
Sure. I absolutely, and I understand that the range is good. It's when people are looking at vCISOs, it's like, are they getting a full-time CISO or a part-time CISO, or what's the responsibilities? And if I have an incident, can I call on that CISO?
Exactly.
And
do they know what to do, Todd, when you do have that incident? Are they able to handle the situation?
Absolutely. I have one last question before I'd like to get your final thoughts. In terms of say there's an incident or something, are you contracting as a vCISO with other companies, organizations that you're also pulling in, say on a subcontracting basis, in the event that you need those additional resources?
The answer is yes. However, I think we need to look at some of the scenarios in which we might feel that we are over capacity in that regard. Certainly, with my client base, there's an understanding here that if any one client has a significant issue, the others are going to defer, and they would do the same if they had a situation. So it's well understood that there's only so much time in the day, and that you may have to disappear, for a couple of days to handle something. I do believe the other side of the scenario is fairly rare. So let's say our recent Log4j issue produced significant incident responses across a wide marketplace. Everybody in-house and virtual or fractional is going to be scrambling, and it's a different dynamic here. So I guess in summary, what I'm saying is that the chances of multiple incidents happening across any number of clients is fairly low. But if it did happen, it would be so significant, everybody would be in line anyway.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, this has been great, and I really appreciate the discussion here. I'd just like to get your final thoughts. Matthew, you want to give us a quick 30-second, what sort of advice would you give to current, emerging, experienced CISOs that are thinking about this vCISO space, or companies that are looking to hire a vCISO?
Yeah, I would say probably I would focus on the fact that it is challenging in a different way than being in-house. You have to be on your feet, thinking fast and fast switching all the time, so that you can handle multiple client loads. But it's also extremely rewarding to be able to work across so many companies. And again, for me, I love the idea of building all the time and designing new things that didn't exist before. So the work, when you really love it, is pretty easy.
Great. Michael?
So I would suggest, a rose by another name it's still a rose. You can call it vCISO, BCISO, CISO, little big CISO. We're all doing the same thing, and that's program development, program management, and then maintaining that program over time. The difference with some of the CISOs that are getting into the virtual space, though, you have to understand, you're not paying me for 30 minutes of my time. You're paying me for 30 years of experience, right? And what's that to you? And how does that bring value to you? And understanding your value as a CISO is critical, because there's so many folks kind of spending into this space. And I just think a lot of folks are not qualified to provide the level of service that some of us do as a virtual CISO, interacting with board subcommittees or even with the board level. So, if that's your goal is to get into this space, understand the services that you need to provide, understand your value, and know what you're going to be competing with when other folks go in and bid out that. You have to be able to clearly demonstrate that experience that you bring to the table is really of value, because you've been through every tabletop they're going to go through. You've already done it. You've seen it. You responded, and it is always all hands on deck when there's an incident. But hopefully they've already got an incident response plan in place, and all you're doing is facilitating at that point, correct? And if they don't, then maybe that's not a maturation level that's equal to your skill set and your experience.
I think that's an excellent point, an excellent place to leave it. I think having that self-awareness is just super critical. So thanks a lot, guys, for taking the time today to help share your thoughts with our listeners.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Wiz is on a mission to help every organization rapidly identify and remove critical risks in their cloud environments. Purpose-built for the cloud, Wiz delivers full-stack visibility, accurate risk prioritization, and enhanced business agility. Wiz connects in minutes using an agentless approach that scans both platform configurations and inside every workload. We perform a deep assessment that goes beyond what standalone CSPM and CWPP tools offer to find the toxic combination of flaws that represent real risk. To learn more about Wiz, please visit securityweekly.com/Wiz.